Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the conversation with Jacko de Bruin, who's joining us from South Africa, and Dean Fry from Eagle Direct, who's joining us from Northern Victoria this morning. It's a great opportunity, I guess, as our industry grows, the opportunities that are out there, and some of these opportunities are opportunities to do a great job and put in systems in place for our animals. I think one of the big things with Eagle Direct is we look at systems, and we call things health by design. So we look at designing a healthy environment for animals, and that's putting in systems and environments for our animals to thrive in. So it's with great pleasure today that we start up the conversation about beef feedlots. And when I first started looking at beef and the beef feedlot industry, I spoke to Carl Berge from Comfort Hoof Care, that's been working and well renowned throughout the dairy side, and he pointed me towards Jacko de Bruin. And I spoke to Jacko from South Africa, and we realised we both had a passion for the agricultural industry and also the beef animals as well. So we got Jacko out to Australia, and we went up the east coast of Australia just to do a bit of a road show about what we could do with some of the equipment we've got, but some of the systems we've got about effective hoof trimming. And with great success, we found a great response to that. We would have had Jacko out here over the last 2 years, but we've just been a bit restricted in that also. And Dean Fry, who's joining us today, also comes from a strong animal health background. Dean joined the Eagle Direct team to really push on our training side and establishing the equipment of effective hoof trimming. So Dean's also got a great passion for animal welfare and animal health, and especially hoof health as well. So we've got a great team of people here today that to pick their brains. It's a conversation, so please join in, throw your conversations and your questions in. We'd love to hear them, because what your feedback helps us direct that conversation forward. So just some of the things we'll be covering with Jacko. I'm going to throw it over to Jacko and Dean, but some of the things we'll be covering today. Dean flicks it over to the next slide. So we're just looking at general feedlot health, hoof health. We found a real spot in the long-fed cattle game. I guess one of the things we saw was cattle being trimmed before they left the feedlot, directly before they left the feedlot for travel's sake. And we thought there must be a production gain by trimming these animals earlier and getting them onto feed and the production side as well. It's also, we'll go into hoof anatomy. I think it's a really wonderful thing that I've learned just in regards to what's actually happening in that hoof capsule as well, and also developing an action plan around it. So we know the problem, we know the anatomy, and we've got a way to be able to fix it. And then where do we go from here, and how we can support you and your business. So what's the fuss with hoof health? You know, we were just talking about rugby and the World Cup there before we came online, and my coach always said they can't run without legs. Cattle can't walk without feet also. So I think, you know, it's something that we really need to make sure that mobility is right. They've got access to feed. We want to see weight gain on these animals as well, feed conversion and utilisation. We always talk about the carcass quality of the animal and making sure that carcass quality, we do a lot of work to get it to a certain stage. We want the stress on that animal to be absolutely minimal, and also animal well-being is a real key aspect of. We've got a responsibility to our animals, but also our suppliers and the people we're feeding. And staff satisfaction, we really love working with people that are like-minded and love animals as well, and being able to work with good gear and good training is really, really important, and that's what we're here to support you with. So without any further ado, I'm going to throw it over to Jacko. Now, Jacko comes with a 31 years experience of playing with hooves, and 23 really focusing on the cattle side. And like I said before, he's trimmed on every continent around the world. I think Australia was your last one, Jaco. Am I correct? So we've had him out here, and over 200,000 cattle that he's trimmed over that time. And I found him great to work with. Not only is he capable, he's a man of action. He gets on the tools. Both these men do get on the tools and actually trim feet. They're not just book readers. They're actual physical hoof trimmers. So they're a great experience to have on board. So here's Jacko on one of our feedlot tours in Queensland. And I think just getting out and about and seeing what's on the ground is what brought us to this conversation today. So bringing these two men to you, and hopefully as this develops that we can get back on the road and get Jacko back out here. But we've been able to do a lot with Zoom lately. Anyway, Jacko de Bruin, without any further ado, I'm going to throw them over to you. Please, just as Jacko's talking, shoot through your questions, and we can answer them towards the end when we throw it over to Dean also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, thank you. It's such a privilege to be part of this webinar, and to be part of the Eagle Direct team as well. Now, for us here in Africa, it is 11 o'clock in the night. So just call me if I fall asleep as we talk. So to start off with this first slide, don't let the blue gum trees in the background fool you, because this is also a picture taken in South Africa. So we do have the Wagyu industry here as well, not nearly as big, especially on the feedlot side, than in Australia. But I'm quite involved with the seed stock producers as well. And I will come back to that specific slide a little bit later on. So how best to safely assess hoof health? So it is, there's a few things that we're going to discuss in this conversation that we have around hoof care. And we will slowly go through it. You're welcome for the next slide. Okay, how to diagnose lameness. So the pin riding is a common practice in all the feedlots, and that's exactly where the first process of diagnosing this lame cattle begin. Is identifying them and bringing them into the hoof trimming chute and to pick up their feet. Now I think it's so important when we talk about lameness. Many times we directly go to the hoof, and the reason for that is actually very interesting. 98% of all lameness in cattle will be found in the hoof or in the claws, and that's the reason why we talk about hoof lameness in the hoofs specifically today. So and I'm going to discuss various lameness issues, explain a little bit about the anatomy, but just to make it interesting, it's the purpose of today is not to give a lecture on the anatomy. And then Dean will finish off with the action plan, how we can actually address this through preventative work. You can go to the next slide. Right, so there's three major lesions that cause lameness, and then the fourth it would be the overgrown feet. So overgrown feet cause some other areas of lamenesses, but for now I'm going to talk about white line lesions, which is the one on the slide, and then two others after this. Now, white line lesions is probably the most common lesion we find, but very interesting, we find it on the back feet, and we find it on the outside claws of the back feet. And there's a very good reason for that, and we cover that in our training sessions, why specifically the outer claws on the back feet have the white line lesions. And if you look at the picture on the right, maybe just one slide back. The picture on the right, you'll often see stones in the foot, and many people will think that the stones created the lameness. But there's actually something else that created the separation on the white line, and the stones only came into that separation. Because we cannot remove all stones and say now we won't have any lameness. So understanding the whole biomechanics, understanding the anatomy that we cover in our training session is actually very important. Right, so the second two lesions is both on one slide. That's foot rot and then a toe ulcer or toe necrosis. Now, foot rot, many times in the past, all lame cattle would have been referred to as foot rot. Now, foot rot is not so common in relation to toe necrosis and white line lesions, but the moment where the crawl get cleaned or something like that, and there's stones that get disturbed, we often find foot rot. Now, foot rot, just to explain it in short, is a swelling that or a lesion that you will find on the skin between the claws. There's always swelling in the foot, and the two claws will separate a little bit from each other, and you can actually see a lesion, and sometimes there's even a yellow pus that comes out. Now, foot rot is the only thing that you can treat with antibiotics, but a topical treatment together with a systemical treatment is very important. But for toe necrosis, white line lesions, the antibiotics does not help at all, and Dean will talk about that at the end. So toe necrosis or a toe ulcer is something that we only find in feedlots after transport of cattle, where they actually, in the loading process or on the truck, broke a claw off or wear it down so much that we have a lesion on the toe area, or many times because of over trimming. So if we talk about hoof care today, I think it's so important to emphasize that we talk about the correct hoof care, someone that knows the anatomy, that understands exactly how to trim the feet, because the very same thing that can be the answer can also be the reason why we see lesions like these that you see on the right top right. Maybe on the next slide, there's an example of a claw that was over trimmed before, and when they bring this in, a lesion were found on the toes. Now, we could see the pus coming out on the picture on the left, and on the right, just a little bit of loose horn were open, but that's not the final stage of the whole process. Maybe just to stress that, because to remove all loose horn is extremely important. But for us, we actually never want to see any lamenesses in the toe area. So this is typically on the front of the claw, not on the back. So the toe area, if we see any lesions there, we have to look at the facilities or the way cattle get handled, or definitely on the hoof trimming side. So for all managers and owners that attend this webinar, I think that is an important note to make. Is if you see a lot of toe lesions, there's definitely something that we can help with to prevent that. Because that's not supposed to be seen at all. You can go to the next slide. All right, just to explain a little bit why we experience these toe lesions. Dean, now you can help me with your mouse. So we have the three bones. On top will be the phalanx 1, P1, P2 is the one in the middle, and P3 is the one that have the shape of a hoof. And I'm going to refer to that P3, the third one that have the shape of a hoof, in some of the other slides. And that little bone is supposed to be nice and smooth without any ridges. The moment we have ridges or calcification on that, we know that there's inflammation involved. So then I refer to the blue. On the front, we have the extensor tendon, and at the back, the deep flexor tendon. We will refer to those and the ligaments also later on. And then maybe the most important one is the digital cushion or the fat pad. It's that where the mouse is at this stage. So the fat pad is only on the heel area and not on the toe area. And that's why it's so important that the trimmers knows exactly how much to take off. So it's important to trim enough on the toe area, because that's where the most of the overgrowth take place. So we have to trim on the toes, but over trimming on the toes without having a fat pad on the toe, you can actually see how close the bone is to the soil surface or the ground surface. And that is why it's so important. And I'm going to show some other pictures about the fat pad to illustrate it better. So we can go to the next one. The next slide. Right. So there's a video that actually show how the fat pad work. It absorbs shock. And keep in mind, although it's not so easy to see on that one, there's no fat pad on the front. Maybe by making it yellow with a coloring, it's not so visible that there's no fat pad on the front end. And this is also a very, very young animal. That suspension that we find there in the hoof, and the work that the fat pad does. You can move to the next slide. Right. So typically when we find overgrown feet, now overgrowth is the biggest reason for lameness in long-fed cattle, because the hoofs grow 5 millimeters a month, and if there's not enough wear, they develop different problems. Now, one of the big problems when we have overgrown feet is that the toe grow faster than the heel, and then the pedal bone actually make a rotation to the back, and that's where you find that blue arrow. So now suddenly the back of the pedal bone is pinching on the corium, and it can actually destroy the fat pad. On the right hand side, you can see the fat pad is not as clear as the previous picture that we had, the video of the fat pad. You can take the next slide for me. Right, so this is a good example of a healthy claw. On the left, you'll see a cross cut of a healthy claw, and it's got a concave. On the left, the healthy one is a convex shape. On the overgrown and the inflamed one is more like a concave shape. The pedal bone, the one that looks like a small little hoof, if you look at it from the bottom, the picture on the left show how smooth it is. Now, typically on the right side, that is where calcification formed because of inflammation. And if you would take the whole hoof capsule off, you'll see the bottom two pictures. On the left, a light pink color, which shows that it's healthy, and the bottom right, a picture where you can see the inflammation, severe inflammation already. So a very good illustration of a healthy foot to the left and an inflamed one to the right. Right, so those inflammation many times happen because of a poor blood supply. Now, in the illustration of the video on the right, and that's something you can do yourself as well, especially if you just let your nail take the weight and not the whole finger, but you'll suddenly see that the nail becomes white because there's not enough blood supply. Now, that's exactly the same problem we have with cattle, especially when we talk about heat stress. When they lay down, they have the best blood supply in the claws, and when they walk, it's not as good. But if they stand, it's the worst. So if they stand long periods of time for them to cool down, then we don't have a good blood supply. And then something like the slide that we have on the left, the picture on the left, we start to see sole also developing exactly on the point where the back of the pedal bone, that's that last number 3 bone in the shape of a hoof, where the back of the pedal bone pinches, exactly that one. Thank you, Dean. This helps me a lot. And that's also the reason why we hollow the foot out after trimming, is to relieve some pressure there. Again, that's something for a later stage. So the next slide just shows very interesting data about when cattle will lay down. It all depends on their own body temperature. They will only lay down from a body temperature of 37.8. Now, this is work done in dairy cattle, most probably not exactly the same in beef cattle, but it's still very interesting. And then they will actually stand up from 39 degrees. So they, although they might still be tired or sore-footed, the moment the body heat is at a certain stage, they will stand up. And then by standing up, having a poor cooling system, they actually only can cool with a wind over their body. They will cool down 0.6 degrees per hour. So it's a slowly cooling down process. So to the next slide, we'll see, I think it's so important that we can not only talk about, we can never talk about hoof care and not address heat stress. Heat stress is a very important factor that we have to provide the shade, have to provide enough clean, cool water. Ventilation is extremely important, and the nutrition obviously plays a major role in it. The next one.
Jaco, to add to a discussion point on that as well, as you mentioned, we work on 5 to 6 mil of horn growth per month, and when we have heat stress, it's not often at the time that we see the lameness is at the direct heat stress. It could actually be 2 months, 1 to 2 months later, when that horn has actually worn through in terms of growth, because we've had the impact of the heat stress at the time. It's created the inflammation. It's created a number of different insults that then takes that 1 to 2 months to then show physically.
Exactly. Now that's so true. We see it many times. That period of time, 6 to 8 weeks after the terrible heat waves. So you are totally right with that. Just out of interest sake, that heavier cattle with a higher dry matter intake actually have a higher higher prevalence of heat stress. And then again, the moment that you can cool them down, there's some studies that prove 317 grams of additional 86 grams of daily growth, average daily gain. Right, you can go to the next one. So this is exactly what Dean was talking about. The hoof grow at a rate of 5 millimeters a month. So it takes 15 months to grow out. So a cow grazing in the field, being 10 years old, probably developed 8 or 9 times the size of this hoof in a period of her lifetime. So the moment we do not have enough wear on the claws, when they don't walk around enough, as we will see in the feedlots, or they don't have a coarse, rough enough surface to walk on, we find that the picture below that the hoofs become long. The hoofs normally grow out more on the toe. Well, we see the overgrowth on the toe. It's not actually that it grows more, but there's more growth there because it's the stronger part of the foot, because there's a kind of a break over on the toe, and the axial wall and abaxial wall joint, that makes it so much stronger, and that's why it doesn't wear down. The backside is a little bit softer. and I will explain that. So as I say, probably the biggest problem we have in the feedlot industry, especially with long-fed cattle, because in South Africa we don't go over 120 days, but I mean there's many feedlots that go up to 150 days, and then long-fed is 400, 500 days. And then we experience what we see here on these pictures. Very long and overgrown claws with a bad hoof angle there, where we can see the mouse on the picture on the right, and that need to be rectified correctly. And I'll explain a little bit what the procedure would be to do it. So it's extremely painful to have overgrown feet, just because of the fact that the longer the feet grows out, obviously there's no live tissue in that part, and it becomes so dry that there's a shrinking process, which is extremely painful for them. It's like many women also say when they have long nails, the fingertips is painful. Cattle actually have to walk on it. Now, despite the fact that it's so hard and painful just to have the length, by having the bad hoof angle is extra pressure on the corium, as we shown in that other picture earlier, and then there's extra strain on the deep flexor tendons. I showed you the tendons earlier, and obviously if those long claws will break off, it always break off too short, and then that's where the toe necrosis or those toe ulcers or toe abscesses develop. Now, an interesting thing again, when we look at overgrown feet, we many times see that on the back feet, the outer claws are more overgrown than the inner claws, and that's got to do with the biomechanics, and that's also one of the reasons why we have so much more lameness, especially in the back feet and in the outer claws of the back feet, and also on the heels of the back feet. And that is something that we teach the hoof trimmers and the technicians that undergo the training program with us. I think there's a next slide that just shows some other cattle also. So the picture on the left is a left back foot, so that's why you cannot even see the other claw. Picture on the right is a right back foot, again with the overgrowth, more overgrowth even on the outer claw. So we developed the functional hoof trimming, and we are affiliated with an American company that's been doing this, and that's where I have done my training all over the world, is through a company called the Dairyland Hoof Care Institute. And there's a whole group of instructors, and we work along with each other, and we work with a lot of dead cadaver feet when we do training and cut it open. So we by understanding the anatomy, we developed over a very long period of time. That's about probably the last 28 years since that business was founded, or the training school was founded. We permanently developed a method of trimming that matched the anatomy. So what we aim to do is to shift the weight from where that pedal bone pinch, and have the cattle walking a little bit more on the toes, more on the toe triangle, and that will reduce the strain on the tendons, that blue tendons that I showed on that other picture. We will have better function of the claws, and it will eliminate the pain. And the total approach result would be then a better animal well-being situation. So on the next slide, I can show what we basically do to create a better hoof angle and help them to walk on their toes and not on the heels, so that pedal bone, the back of the pedal bone, gives so much strain and pinching. Now this is a dead foot. One of the claws were cut open, and the one side of the one claw was trimmed and the one side not trimmed, just to show it's not a manipulation between an inner claw and an outer claw. It's actually one very same claw that one side is trimmed and one side is not trimmed. And on the next slide, you'll see where we have the measuring tool with on the foot. The untrimmed side is a very sharp hoof angle, where the trimmed side is close to 52 degrees. So it's a massive difference that we make just by trimming the toe end and leaving the heel end, as the previous slide showed us.
Jaco, to expand on your point about transferring weight to the toe triangle, and as much as we can, it's in relation to this angling that, as you say on the left-hand side photo, is that we've probably got a 35 degree angle of what that claw is. It's very flat. It's putting a lot of pressure back onto that pedal bone and moving it to that 52 plus degrees. That 52 plus degrees is very, very similar to what you see a calf is. So when a calf is born and you look at the angle of the calf's hoof, you actually see a very sharp angle, which is where we're actually trying to achieve with our effective functional trimming, is to restore angle and balance between the two claws, as Jaco explains.
Yes, yeah, it's such a good comment, because we can always refer to the state it ought to be, or the state it used to be. So any calf will be born with the correct hoof angle, and all this circumstances change that angle. So it's a very good reference, and it's a very good point that you make there, Dean. So this is a video just showing the hoof angle. Okay, so what happened on that picture, the inside claw, so this is a left back foot, the inside claw was trimmed and the outside claw was not trimmed. And although the inside claw is still not on the hoof angle that we want it to be, there is already a huge improvement. So if you play it again, we will see the difference. So that's very close to 52 degrees, but have a look at the outside. And that's only by one trim. Now it's a little bit overgrown. We would like to see these animals quicker and not in such an advanced stage, but still much can be done to improve her gait. Okay, I can go to the next slide. Some examples of how the functional trimming basically improved the hoof angle. So if you look at the picture on the left, it's a before picture, and see actually how long that claw was, the inner claw of the left back. And trimmed on the right picture, you can see that's the normal length. So it was originally longer, now it's way shorter. Just to note there is we spare the heel on the inner claw and take as much as possible on the outer claw. There will be some other pictures that show that also good. So there you can see how much the hoof angle was increased by sparing the heel and trimming much on the toe. So it's also a before and after picture of exactly the same foot. There's a good example. Many times the unbalanced claws on the outer claws create a little bit of a longer toe. And here you can see how the hoof angle was improved by taking so much away from the toe. I think what happened on the picture on the left is that it already broke off too short. Both of them were most probably the same size. But interesting on this picture is that if you have an imbalance on the heels, have to balance it, because that overloading of the imbalance can also create white line lesions and sole ulcers. On the next slide. So there's a good example of a foot that while before trimming, the slide on the left, and after trimming, the slide on the right. Now there's a little bit of a hoof chip. The grinders that we use take hoof chips off like a cheese cutter. So that hoof chip laid there on the toe, which it looks like a very short foot, but if you zoom into it a little bit, you'll see it's just, yeah, it was just a hoof chip there. But have a look at the hoof angle difference. The right back foot not trimmed in comparison with the left back foot that's trimmed. And you can imagine yourself how much that would improve the gait of the animal and the total welfare of the animal. Go to the next one. So it's like going to the barber shop and to have a haircut. You don't pay for the amount of hair that lay on the ground, and that's exactly what's happening with hoof trimming as well. It's actually to develop the art of what to take away, what need to stay behind, so that you only take away that that does not fit the criteria of a normal foot. So this is before and after pictures. On the left, you can see both of those claws made a curl. The middle picture, only the outer claw was trimmed, inner claw was left, and the picture on the right, both of them were trimmed down. So many people are concerned about trimming because they know that when they cut the horns, it will bleed, and many people will think that that long and overgrown feet will bleed if you cut it right back. And there's a very good example that you can trim quite a bit, but always keep in mind with the training process that we give, we teach how much can be trimmed on the front, so that we don't develop those toe ulcers or toe necrosis. So the next few slides is all about one specific cattle, one beast. The one there at the back had lameness, and obviously also just being at the back shows you something. We can see the arch back also show lameness, and he favored the left back foot. So the next slide is that specific ox just walking on its own. See the arch back, see the shorter strides, and then now it was actually a lameness on the right back, not on the left back. Left was terribly overgrown, but the right back foot had a broken claw. But you can see on the gait that animal is not happy. The next slide, I just want to.
With that, Jaco, too, just a great observation of cattle in locomotion impairment is that because they've got a very good view from the front with their eyes, they understand where they put their front feet, put their front claws. So if there's a rock or an obstacle in front here, they know exactly where to put that front claw so it doesn't land on it. The idea of the back claws, because they can't see where that back foot is actually going, is to follow and track where that front foot was. So where this one is, that back foot should basically make the same space. When you start seeing them actually short stride and they pull up in here instead of there, that's a really good observation for us to determine if these animals are actually got a locomotion impairment and a pain within their feet.
Yes, so true. Yeah, that shorter stride is visible on the on this video as well. Now that's wonderful. You can also see the movement of the head. The moment it put weight on the back, the head goes down. So this is just a picture of the very same animal. Look at the horns. Then the picture from the front, just so show that same ox, actually to try and show the ear tag, which is 15230. But also having this stress and pain, we see the saliva, which is also a sign of pain and stress, and that wasn't even a very hot day, but most probably heat stress as well, with the weight of that specific animal. Right, so we found on that animal, if you go back one slide, Dean, I think on the picture on the left, we could actually see the broken claw. Can you see the broken claw on the right back? And then on the left back was just a long overgrown foot. So that's typically what we will see. You can go to the next slide. That's typically what we will see when it's overgrown, like the picture on the top. which was the left back foot, and then that one broke off. So for us, by just taking a group of cattle out of the kraal, start to walk with them, the lame one was at the back. We investigated the specific lame one and found the broken claw. And then we made the interesting inquiry and said, can we have an idea of what was the average daily gain? And the owner of this feedlot gave us permission to show this information. Michiel's vessels from Beyond Beef Wagyu. They are seed stock breeders and also have a feedlot. Now that specific animal 15230 had an average daily gain of 260 grams per day, where his countermates had the best one was 1.5 kilogram, 1.56 kilograms per day. So now obviously this would have reduced only in the last 30 days or 40 days. Most probably the average daily gain was good, but it reduced to a minus, which gave us such a low average daily gain. So I think I'm going to hand over to Dean to explain more what we've done, work we've done in Australia at some feedlots. So Dean, if you would want to take over from me, please.
Thanks, Jaco. What a fantastic overview. And coming from someone with such a wealth of experience in this beef lameness industry, you know, what you've seen, Jaco, and what you've trained and what you've done and what you still continue to do with your beef herds in Africa is just fantastic. So we really appreciate the wealth of experience that you're bringing to us in Australia and to our feedlots. That we know that there's some great opportunities to improve production, welfare, and happiness for everyone involved in the game. So thanks again, Jaco. So to just hand it on a little bit, this is the Comfort Hoof Care shoot that we from Kalburgi that we utilise and promote within the country, and have got a number of these onto some feedlots now, and are conducting training as well to assist with the steps that are associated to actually getting a proper, effective, functional trim. Because we do tend to find in the industry of ruminants overall that some trimming can be done to the point where we've got a lame animal, we go and deal with that lame animal, and we forget about the actual functional trim, which is what Jaco was explaining about the angle and the balance in between the lateral and the medial claw. So the inside, the outside and the inside claw, getting a weight balance between the two is very, very important step in treating a lame animal, because if we only treat for the lameness, we can quite often see that lameness come back very soon because we haven't dealt with the problem to start with. So having appropriate equipment to be able to do that allows all of us to actually do this safely for both the animal and for ourselves. So we're just reiterating this photo, this slide again that we utilized before on white line lesions. In a recent training a few months back in some feedlots in Queensland, we happened to have a beast that came through that had been a notoriously known beast for having a lameness problem. And as Jaco sort of explained and outlined, that unfortunately we got a little bit of a dogma within the ruminant industry, and it is still across the world, that all lameness is foot rot. And the first point of call happens to be give it a jab of penicillin or an antibiotic. And unfortunately, 99% of the time, you're really not going to get any sort of response out of treating with an antibiotic for a non-infectious lesion. And that's the difference between these sort of lesions that we're dealing with, is that 85% of our lesions or more, as Jaco said, probably even into the 90s, is actually a non-infectious lesion. So antibiotics is actually going to provide no real benefit. There may be some little relief, but realistically, it's going to be a waste of an antimicrobial, potentially lose a very good antibiotic from resistance, from overuse, and realistically not helping economics on the farm or the animal itself. So this particular animal, not this one in vision at the moment, but when we were able to pull it up and actually pull it back, well, actually it was the front right foot, and actually start doing the functional trim, and found out that, we had an underlying white line. And the end result is a pretty gruesome sight. But as Jaco explained, we have to take off all loose horn. If we leave any loose horn in there, it's just a site of aggravation, potential inflammation, and another infection from allowing manure and likes to actually sit on that. So we really have to clean it right out, which means it can look quite gruesome, but it's just fascinating that within 2 to 3 days, you actually have a covering. Again, go back to that 5 to 6 mil of horn growth a month. We actually get within a week a very good covering over something that looks extremely gruesome. So it's very important that we have the ability to be able to pick these animals up and not just say, hey, this animal's lame. He's got lameness. Potentially it's foot rot, when it's actually more than likely not. And foot rot's a great one because it's relatively easy to see once you picked up the foot. And you can see that astronomical swelling, and particularly the smell. And quite a lot of the time, it may be just a rock that's actually in between the claws, and you flick that out, and guess what? Without antibiotics, you actually repair the job. But if it is foot rot, it definitely needs to be dealt with straight away. So moving on to what do we do once we've actually decided we're going to do something with lameness and the welfare on our site. We basically need to get some proper training. It's imperative to the overall success of the trimming and outcomes for that animal. Jaco has done a pretty brief overview, purely because of the time we have to understand the anatomy. But understand the anatomy allows us to utilize the pathogenesis, or the reasoning why we're getting a certain lesion, and maybe across a certain number of our beasts and certain age of our beasts and certain times, maybe weather events and likes. But understanding the anatomy really does allow us to backtrack and understand why we're getting these particular lesions. As Jaco explained, it's not what we take off, it's actually what we leave on. It's very important that we're not taking off more than we need. Some horn health is very imperative that we maintain effective horn on that claw. One protocol is working on doing every animal at that 150 days on feed. So an effective functional trim. So not a lameness trim. We're literally in there restoring angle and restoring balance. And that is the crutch of a functional trimming 101, is to restore that foot to look like a calf's foot as they come out. Angle and balance. Then every animal is again done at 300 days on feed. We assess the results and we adjust the action plan, the standard operating procedure. So if we're seeing issues in between the times of those two functional trims, or we're not getting those two functional trims done, and we're actually starting to see some particular lesions developing, it really allows us to actually overview that data and understand where and how that pathogenesis is actually creating that particular lesion, and looking at ways that we can actually mitigate it, which is really important for us. So I think it's pretty obvious why we talk about hoof health, but there's a lot of outcomes and a lot of gains for the producer and their industry. So we're definitely talking about improved animal welfare. There's nothing worse than seeing an animal that can't walk. It's as I've got on the last point there, lame cattle are time consuming and reduce profits. As anyone working in a yard or any sort of farm that has to deal with lame cattle, it's demoralizing for anyone dealing with that animal. We know that they're not well. We know that they're in pain. It's something that we don't have to do. If I use Carl Berge and Professor Nigel Cook, who's a guy over in the Dairyland Initiative, a veterinarian in the US, basically we know right now how to reduce and mitigate probably 95 to 98% of all lameness. So it really comes down to what are we doing that is creating lameness, not what the animal's doing, but what are we doing? So what can we do about it? And these are the things we can do. And you can see, as Jaco explained in a little brief trial there, that we are improving average daily gain and greater feed efficiency, and reducing the amount of non-saleable beasts. So as an industry, what can we do to change things? Well, we definitely have the ability to design an easy to operate trimming facility. And the one in the background of this is fantastic, well roofed. We can put ventilation within that, fantastic lighting. So basically these facilities can be used 24/7 outside of the weather. So it's not impacting anyone that's operating these facilities. It's also friendly on the animal as well. We want to have some high water pressure just to be able to clean the feet if need be. Really sharp knives. When we're doing therapy or treatment trims, as opposed to functional trims, we really need to have appropriate equipment. And that is having basically a surgical knife and having the right equipment to keep those knives very sharp. Because it's a blunt knife that actually is when you create damage, because you go too hard potentially and you've resulted in an issue with that blunt knife. So very sharp knives are very important in the trimming side, particularly on that therapy side. Making sure you have great stocks of glues and blocks. Pain medication is a really interesting one. We're seeing more and more information and research coming out of the ruminant industry that we're seeing a response from using the likes of a ketoprofen, but something that's an anti-inflammatory. And the animal is actually recovering so much faster that when we're actually dealing with a lameness, that we're able to provide some pain medications, some anti-inflammatories. The response back onto feed is greatly improved, and it's a great development over the last probably 5-10 years of just where we can go with treatment for cattle that are in pain. We also having that appropriate and ongoing training and support. I think that's really important for the industry, so that we're not thinking of ways of how to do this, but we're actually knowing years of training and education within the industry around the world of how to go about this and how to effectively, functionally do this to support the animals' welfare. Having excellent records and recording equipment really does allow us to then become that Magnum PI and actually investigate why we're seeing certain amount of lesions and what we can actually do about it, and go about setting a protocol to actually help that. So just to give ourselves a little bit of an overview of what Eagle Direct and Hoof Health. Obviously, we're involved with Jaco, we're involved with Dairy, Carlbergie, Comfort Hoof Care range, Dairyland process. We do provide the ongoing support, training and equipment across the country, and more than happy to come up and walk through particular issues that you may be having on your yard. We do have access to the world leaders. There's probably no one more experienced than Jaco de Bron in the beef hoof health side of things, and we're really honoured to be able to work with Jaco and pull upon that wealth of knowledge. There is a lot of ongoing research in this space. Lameness research is not an easy thing to do. It's
Live television, Dean.
Wow, I'm not sure what's going on there, Mike. Is that back on?
Yep, back on there now. Yep.
Sorry about that. It disappeared on me. So yeah, we're able to basically review the records and help build those ongoing support strategies to be able to improve the hoof health and profitability on your yard. We also are providing a WhatsApp online/phone connection, but just to really engage the employees on the yards, to help both the managers and the owners to build that confidence. We really want to create hoof health champions and support them ongoingly with whatever way and whatever resources we can, and make sure that your business is basically at the forefront of leading health practices. So in conclusion, this is a training opportunity that we had within Queensland Beef Yard. But really, as Mike raised, we're extremely passionate about animal welfare and well-being. We believe there's nothing probably greater and as quick a response as when you deal with lameness on a beef animal. You basically can walk in with a lame animal and walk out of that chute with that animal walking nearly spot on, nearly perfect. And I really struggle to think of anything else that we can do with an animal that is so quickly and impactfully improving that animal's welfare. And the response to, average daily gain, improved carcass fish, reducing the feed costs to market weight because they're so much more efficient at utilising that feed. And we do hope that this information today has been of some importance and use to the industry. We're very happy to become part of the best practice of your business, and we look forward to, basically, if you have any questions related to any of the information presented today, and look forward to hopefully catching up with all of you very soon.
Terrific. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Jacko, for staying up late and joining in the conversation. I guess one of the questions is just fired in there now. If you're looking at this for the first time, like who needs to be involved? And you, Dean, you talked about champions, but what's your team that you've seen successfully work? What team needs to be involved at feedlot level? Jacko, I'll throw that over to you, Eli.
Yes. So what we normally do, we focus more on what we call in-house trimmers or employees of the feedlot in comparison to contractors. Just for biosecurity reasons, we find that most of the feedlots is big enough to take care of their own hoof problems if they have the equipment. And then we identify, the feedlot normally identify the people that's really interested in this field. And many times we had horse farriers, ex-horse farriers, being interested in it. For me, being an ex-horse farrier, also actually started this industry through horses. I can relate to everyone that know how to shoe a horse and trim a horse, that really want to work on the cattle, and they learn the quickest. Horse farriery is an extremely dedicated and precise work, and we love to work with those people that have an interest in this. But as all professions, it's not all about a day's training and then you know exactly how to do the work. There's experience that comes along with it, and for that we partner as mentors with this various platforms, where the WhatsApp group, for instance, is one of it, where people can just, as they find a problem, take a picture, send it on the group, and we can answer it from this side of the world, and share some advice, and in over a period of time, everyone gain the courage to carry on, and we end up by training real good hoof trimmers, becoming a specialist in their area. So that's basically how we would do it, Mike.
Yeah. Very good. So training in-house people and getting the management involved in the process also. Yeah. That's it. Well, terrific. We've had people from all over, I think we've got all over Australia covered. So it's wonderful to have so many people involved. And I guess this is the start of the conversation. If you've heard this webinar, and want to know more and tap into this as a resource, we'd love to be able to chat to you and love to be able to help you through it. And any comments or queries that you've got, or anything you want to pick up on Dean or Jacko, they're both very great communicators, as you've seen this morning, and know their stuff as well. So thank you very much all for joining, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.